Hey guys, before you watch today's video, we have some exciting news for you.
Super exciting.
It makes it sound like we're gonna have a baby.
No, that's not.
Hey guys, before you watch today's video, we have something pretty cool to share with you. Project 24 3.0 has launched this weekend. So existing Project 24 members, you all get it as an upgrade to your current subscription. You don't have to pay anything additional. You just get the new version. And anybody else who buys, you will now start seeing Project 24 3.0.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Very excited for it. Go check it out.
We spend so much time talking about what is and isn't a ranking factor for Google, and the truth is it's a very complex, very large algorithm looking at many hundreds of different factors. So in this video, we're going to talk about some that are pretty surprising that you may find to not be ranking factors, and others that Google says aren't ranking factors that we don't quite believe them on.
Yeah. So we're going to jump right into this. There was a study just recently done, available on rebootonline.com. We'll link to it in the article. I mean, they did this pretty thorough
cool study
where they looked at sites that were hosted on shared hosting versus dedicated hosting. And the issue here is that on a shared hosting plan, multiple websites are using the same servers and have the same IP address. So the hypothesis is, you know, if you are on a shared hosting plan, sharing an IP address
with casino sites and
with
porn
sketchy
and
sites and stuff, you're in a bad neighborhood for hosting. And so is that going to impact your ranking? And their study says, yeah, maybe it does. Google says no.
Not so quick. So John Mueller says artificial websites like this, and that's, they tried to rank for a made-up word.
Right.
And so he says artificial websites like this are pretty much never indicative of any particular effect in normal Google search. It's a cool experiment, blah, 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 but in the end, host where it makes sense for you.
Right.
And that's something that we definitely believe. We've run so many sites starting on Bluehost that got up to 100,000 page views and succeeded very well. We've also run those sites on very nice, very much more expensive servers. Our experience, we have not seen a difference here. And so what we recommend is start wherever it makes sense for you. Most people, it's just going to be a cheap plan that has a great, easy to use interface to get going. If your site gets a lot of traffic and you're really starting to optimize that page speed, sure, move it up to a bigger host, but it hasn't hurt hundreds of Project 24 members who have been successful.
It's also just important to note that the definition of shared hosting really depends how you look at it.
Yes. We've seen over the last few years several even very prominent SEOs, some that we really respect, have come out with headlines saying that user behavior, how long do people spend on your page? Do they click in on this? Just think anything that people do on your website, that whole category is not part of the algorithm. For example, on Search Engine Roundtable, which is a great place, I read it all the time, it's good, but I did disagree with their conclusion here. Google does not use real-life user signals for search rankings. And then another title, Google, user actions on your website are not a ranking factor. Now I read that and I say, ooh, that puts into question a lot of what I believe about SEO. But then if you dive deep into what was actually specifically said, we're drawing a very broad conclusion from something that was actually extremely narrow.
And John says, so in general, I don't think we even see what people are doing on your website, if they are filling out forms or not, if they're converting and actually buying something. So if we can't see that, then that is something we cannot take into account. So he's saying, if we can't see it, we can't take it into account. So it's not a ranking
clearly
factor.
They don't have access to the
form
submission
or the payment process or
right.
anything like that.
So it was very narrow what he actually said, and we've taken a very broad conclusion from
All
it.
user behavior on your website is not measurable and not used to rank your website. That's the conclusion from this. Keep in mind that there are behavior-related things that Google can measure on your website. One, they can measure if your article was actually clicked on or not. They measure that. If you have Google Analytics on your website, they can see if people clicked between articles on your website. No, they're not really able to measure how long people stay unless they click through to another page. Then they can calculate the time in between. But
and only kind of, they have the Chrome browser.
Yeah, that's a good
they
point.
know.
There's a lot more that they can measure. So Anyway, I guess kind of take that with a grain of salt and be careful not to draw too broad of conclusions. The next one is URL length. People have said lots of times, like, don't make your URLs super long, make them very descriptive, whatever. John Mueller says, URL length is not a ranking fraction. Typo, I'm sure he meant ranking factor. It's not. It's not. We've never seen it to matter at all. Our URLs for blog posts, the title of the blog post becomes the URL.
Now, this is where it introduces a new concept. A lot of what we hear other SEOs teaching will take things like this and say, ha, not a ranking factor, so don't pay any attention to it. And we always think through that a lot because a lot of what Google says they give us distinctions without a difference. So, okay, it's not a ranking factor, how long the URL length is. But what if you just have a nice clean URL that clearly shows on the SERP if it might help people to quickly see that your article is relevant to them and click it? It doesn't matter that it wasn't a ranking factor. Sure. It does get you more traffic. So this specifically, we aren't, real
not
advocating.
I
barely even, sometimes I'll be like, let's clean this up, make it a little bit nice. And that's really all it is. So it's not that I'm advocating that actually URL length is a big deal. It's just that we have to put this information through our brains.
And that's going to come up a whole lot more in some of the following ones we're going to talk about now.
So watch this clip from Google where it seems like they're telling us that pogo sticking plays no part in how much traffic you're going to get from the algorithm.
I'm sure you saw this blog post from a few weeks ago where this guy named Mike from Google Canada, from the Google Brain team in Google Toronto, basically confirmed on some level Google search using pogo sticking, click data, and so forth directly in their search rankings. I'm sure you're aware of this. I'm sure you're on that chain with you and Gary and so forth. Can you explain what's going on, or you're not allowed to?
I don't know what specifically the Google Brain people were talking about there. So that's kind of, I guess, on the side. But in general, we do use kind of this information for evaluating algorithms. So that's the kind of thing we've been talking about in the past as well. We do experiments all the time with regards to the search results, with regards to the rankings, and part of the way to do experiments is to see how people react to those experiments.
So after seeing that, we again get this distinction without a difference.
Yes.
So pogo sticking is when somebody clicks into your article, spends a short amount of time there presumably, and then pogo sticks back to the SERP, to the ranking page, and goes to the next result down. There would seemingly be a signal to Google that they didn't find what they wanted on this result, and they needed to go to the next one.
It's not just a bounce. It's a bounce, and then I had to go somewhere else. Seems like a pretty clear indicator that the article in question didn't answer the question.
Those of you who are Project 24 members remember a podcast, I think it was from episode 99, we did just a couple weeks ago, where we released some pretty shocking case studies that we personally saw and were really clean case studies showing that traffic to a website can make it rank. And you guys heard it, I think it like removed all doubt from that question.
We've seen it a couple of times in specific case studies for us where a website that was basically just dead, forgotten, whatever, we mention it in a YouTube video and it sends...
No links.
No links. Just people go look at it. And suddenly, new level of traffic, not just a spike, but then a new level of traffic.
And the organic rankings move up.
They changed. Yes, exactly. They moved up. And when we said that to the Project 24 community, we got several other people in the community who said,
look at this.
We saw the same thing. Check out my analytics graph. Check out where I'm ranking on these articles. This article was dead. It did nothing. And you mentioned it and boom. Now, all of a sudden, this article ranks #1 on Google.
So, it's curious then that we say this tweet from a while ago, where somebody essentially says, can referral traffic be considered a ranking factor? I mean, we've proven the answer is yes. And Google Webmasters directly replies, no, traffic to a website isn't a ranking factor. I just disagree. And unless this is one of those things...
If you're getting traffic to your site, that's a good sign. that's not what we're talking about. It's a distinction without a difference.
Right. Is it the no link mention that sends the flow to the traffic, and that's what they're measuring is the no link mention? I think a lot of this is Google. I mean, their whole company is reliant on you not being able to scam the algorithm. And so they say a lot of stuff that makes it seem like no, only content matters and stuff. And I think the practical effect, that's true because they're very good at what they do. But I think the way they present that sometimes is shady. It's
just maybe not totally honest and upfront and transparent. Right. Absolutely not transparent.
EAT. So Google made a post about EAT. So that's expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. If you're going to write about a medical topic, for example, or you're going to write about somebody's 401k plan, you want it to be from somebody who's going to be a reliable source of information. And so Google has algorithms to track that, right? So here's what they made on the Google blog. They wrote, since we originally wrote this post on EAT, we have occasionally been asked if EAT is a ranking factor. Our automated systems use a mix of many different signals to rank great content. We've tried to make this mix align with what human beings would agree is great content as they would assess it according to EAT criteria. Given this, assessing your own content in terms of EAT criteria may help it align conceptually with the different signals that our automated systems use to rank content. Okay, distinction without a difference. What it's saying is, no, we don't rank EAT. We rank a lot of things that sites that have
EAT.
Good EAT do. It's the same thing.
And that's the point, though. Like, I think what they're trying to do is find ways to measure your EAT. But there's not like an EAT score, right? And there's not a direct way to measure it. So what they're saying is factually correct. We don't measure your authoritativeness. We just look for a lot of factors that indicate authoritativeness. This last one, I think I actually believe.
Our audience will be very interested in this one because we talk about word count a lot.
Word count. Is word count a ranking factor? And John Mueller says, word count is not a ranking factor. Save yourself the trouble. If you are a recipe blogger, please save yourself the trouble. I just want the recipe, please.
They're nuts.
Word count directly is not a ranking factor. And in the past, we've talked about that correlation between word count and ranking. It's been there, especially historically. However, word count is not the driver behind that, right? It's a correlation, but not a causation. It's a correlation because longer articles usually have greater depth of research and greater depth of information. And for many of the informative topics that we would write about on our websites, having more depth of information is good.
Absolutely. It's what we've said forever.
Yeah.
We've never said that word count is a ranking factor, and so you want to do this. It was that, if you force yourself to write 3,000 words, you got to scratch up some knowledge to put in there. In fact, we just did something cool. We did a couple little mentions on YouTube, but we hired someone just for a couple months, a pre-college student, to follow everything that we taught in Project 24, but reduce the word counts dramatically in his articles. And he did a great job for us, but the content just wasn't as good.
It's thinner.
It's lighter. It's thin. You read it and you're like, that's part of the answer. Give me the whole enchilada.
So when he says save yourself the trouble, I don't take that to mean go ahead and write thin content. It doesn't actually matter for ranking. That's not true at all. The point is that you should write the amount of content that is appropriate and necessary for you to give a thorough and complete answer for the search topic, the search term that was given. That's all you have to do. And if that can be done in 500 words thoroughly,
great.
Fantastic. Please do it.
I want to invite you to check out the Project 24 podcast. It's something we do every single week with different members of our team where we're talking about whatever's cool that week.
Yeah.
Whatever we're working on, whatever we're learning, doing this on many channels, many different websites all at once. Nathan goes around and he's like, hey, who's got something cool this week? What's going on? And it's things like this where we're putting together those case studies of up to the minute, what's working right now, what's not working. That's the stuff that goes into the podcast. All Project 24 members get it. It's there every single week. So go check it out.